Julie here with Sirius Dallas Moon, and Moon in Libra accentuating on the Venusian. Venus in Gemini, Mercury, I hope it is already moving from the 22ing in Aries, Mars in its home sign. I want to talk about the type of occult, Libra being my 8th house, the type of occult not just women should be doing, but definitely women. Um, why Why now? Why does it matter? And why can't it go without abolishing any type of rape under any guise, whether it's marriage, sex work, um, any arrangement that doesn't honor the feminine? Why does it excruciatingly matter right now? And what are we negating with our cult? So I think it's pretty fair. This is Sol Hour of Mars Day, and I think it's pretty fair to discuss the fact that we are in timelines that are in correlations with the witch hunt timelines. The I have colleagues from Slavic countries that downright address the fact that there are agendas to do a femicide and children, basically meaning raping girls upon their puberty to bring children under the guise of purity. Now, this is where, um, when we talk about occultistic practices in the spirit of our times, basically in general, but in the spirit of our times, the utmost emphasis is to stop the targeting of infants and adult inner children, basically of those that are adults, to stop the targeting of them when they turn to their inner children, and in general, but particularly when they turn to their inner children, because when people caretake to their inner child, they prevent themselves being a perpetrator. They prevent themselves being a person who manifests mass global extinction. And to abolish any targeting of people for trafficking and any use of rape in occult. Ritual abuse is essentially occultistic rape upon astrological elections with invoking certain deities in order to basically invade an infant and live precariously within the infant as a soul. And usually these souls went through a burial ritual that prevented them from ever wanting to go underground. And this is done to basically siphon the energy and take over the real estate, natural resources of people and their sovereignties. Now, the more susceptible a culture is to that means the more ritual abuse there is in a culture. And when we think about the occult we should be doing in general, which is honoring the feminine, and the occult we should be doing as women, is to abolish ritual abuse, to abolish occultistic rape, to abolish the targeting of infants in the chronological age of infanthood, and as people mature and turn to caretaking to their inner child. Because anything that neglects that, and again, if a person, how should I say that? If that was not done in the past, people can always complement that. People can always begin to practice now. It's not a It's not a bashing of what's done, more like an emphasis of what needs to be, so that can be corrected. Nothing that built. I come from a country that was built, and I'm not even talking about what happened to the people in the region of the Middle East, was built by people who raped their own. I know what it's like to be living, having to always be half dead, half alive, half present, half gone, not really being able to fully disclose my sex or gender or marital status, being in a point where one wears a ring to disclose and to hide something as they turn to being an infant because the foundation was of rape. Being called a villa in the jungle, but oh, what's happening in that villa? And any declaration of independence is a ritual. So anything that is built on rape, and here's the thing, what I love about my natal Urania in the 8th house, which is um, associated with astrology, and in the 8th house is of course occult, and opposition of Aries, is that we have the opposition that we now have in the sky with Spica and Aries. I have it natally from Hasta Nakshatra to the middle decan of Aries, and this is where it is not right if it is rapey. And if it is rapey, it will be global chaos. It will be chaos to the chaos. And what I love about that is that Libra in Hasta Nakshatra could fall into the teeter tatter. It could fall into whites were enslaved, now blacks will be enslaved. So blacks were enslaved, now what? And Aries in Aries asks, and what about abolishing slavery altogether? And this is where we basically we create justice not by evening the scales, but by eliminating the rape. We create a new world, not the world of, a perpetual war state, but something that actually not transcends, but incarnates, because in rape nothing actually exists. This is why there is no sovereignty. And the opposition that we have right now with Spica and Aries in Andromeda constellation is brilliant. One of the things that I see with that opposition is suddenly people talking about Amber Heard and, hey, look at Johnny Depp saying he would basically rape the burned corpse of Amber Heard. Why rape? Like, if she harmed him and he wants to unalive her, that would be like a normal feeling that he feels but doesn't execute. But why rape? And was it really Amber Heard that raped Johnny Depp? Because it seems like he's angry at somebody else and taking it out on a woman who is the feminine. Now, again, there can be many intricacies to that story. But even during the Me Too, Amber Heard was excluded from that. Now, was it rightfully or wrongfully? I don't know. But it's also the notion that even with Spica, there are those whose sovereignty was excluded, those who were excluded from justice. And this is where Aries and the Aries project, the superhuman project, has the notion that Spica doesn't address that yet, and Spica can't address that without taking into account the occultism, for which we need to declassify classified projects. One of the AIs I saw that was almost satirical, it was showing FBI and ICE raid houses of millionaires, taking a lot of children from that were trafficked there. Now, the AI-ness was posing certain things as something like, who do we expect to do that? The FBI and ICE? And in a world where we sacrifice that, the mass sacrifice of women being accused of the witchcraft that basically men did is only a natural cause. If women are willing to sacrifice women, if women are willing to swipe under the rug the rape and trafficking of women, if women are okay with the targeting of infants and the targeting of adults as they tend to care to their inner infant, then witch hunt is just a natural procedure. And so, um, just as if I take a look at my lineage from my grandfather line, if they were okay with wedding at puberty, if they were okay with the red stain on the white sheet being a symbol of a celebration of wedding, then the Holocaust, because to live like that for a woman is a Holocaust, and then the actual Holocaust was just a natural thing. It was just a natural continuation of the lineage. As terrible as it's, the lineage did not sustain it. How did they expect the young girls to sustain that? And the young boys, because a man does not rape at 12 years old under whichever guise without being raped somewhere. Maybe at the synagogue, maybe by rabbis, I don't know. This is a timeline that really prompts asking the hard questions. Because the opportunity to change things that haven't changed in 9 millennia is there. Sedna hasn't been in Gemini in 12 millennia. Everything that we can associate with Gemini, the duplicities, the twinning, the technology, the twin cities, the cityfication, with Pluto it was the Mengele experiments, everything can be changed. Doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to go wrong. But it can't do so without us actually abolishing the things that go. Now, one of the things that when we talk about the cult, and addressing the esoteric, one of the big things to change about the esoterics is the fact that there was use of the, as an astrologer, I look at the Islamic Golden Age, astrology was used. They would predict astronomy to predict astrology to use in ritual. What ritual? We know what ritual. Epstein dossiers pretty much expose what rituals. Now, this is the grand missing, because an infant that goes through whichever astral or ritual that touched that infant, then that child goes to their mom and dad and say, hey, I saw this, I saw that, and those sites are quite disturbing, to say, hey, let's take it to somebody that knows about these things. And that somebody would take that child to the physical rituals where he would participate in these things and be the perpetrator of these things. Now, if the child didn't speak, they would live an eternity with their parents thinking that they're all about themselves, that they're selfish, that they can't really clean the house, when they were actually pedant. And there's no one to stop that. And everybody thinks that that's okay. And that somebody is imagining it all drops on the child. Aries is fantastic at pinpointing to us that there were these people who were left out. And opposing Spica, who are the people who are left out of justice? And as we see justice as the actual realistic procedure, we see that it's inaccessible to these type of offenses. And yet, if that is not stopped, that is the feminine. If that feminine is not defended and protected, then the continuation, it will be by law, outlawing the feminine, which we see in practice happening. And the people who say, oh, people whine and weep about, you won't be whining and weeping when you'll be burned at the stake. You have a lot of legacy, but you'll be burned at the stake because you were okay with people and infants being raped. Mercury still 22. Nothing takes precedence over honoring the feminine when we want to do esoterics that is not occultistic rape of infants. And that includes arguing with the scriptures. We can't have the scripture that raped as creation guiding our occultistic work. Now, as far as both men and women occultists and esotericism is in alignment with abolishing rape, the legacies can be here for 12 millennia. The possibilities, the opportunities. Is it easy? Well, with the first women that spoke up before the Me Too, and I was one of them, we didn't know there was a Me Too coming. We understood that if we will not speak, we will die, and if we will speak, we might die. Before the Epstein dossiers, during the assassination of the scientist, I was one of the scientists that they were trying to assassinate. You ask, where are the scientists? But when one of them shows up and tells you, here I am, they're trying to get me too. You're like, oh no, they can't connect this person to that phenomenon. That phenomenon is over there, it's big. There's a person there, and they don't look like what one would expect them to look like. No, they're tending to their inner child. They didn't even have the energy to pluck their brows. We can't be guided by Spica and be disturbed by people that saying, hey, that's not right. Spica is about justice. It's about fairness. Ritual abuse, sacrificing peers, trafficking agendas, MK often, those are not right. Wealth consolidation on the buried infants, that is not right. And more practically, it's the timeline where, yes, there was the guillotine. Yes, those that burned the witches on the stake were decapitated on the guillotine. That is true. It is also a timeline where they did target women for witchcraft. And we the women can't negate that with allowing trafficking to bypass, with allowing the raped infants to be targeted at adulthood and upon puberty, to be raped, to be tortured, to be mind controlled, to be blamed for every single thing that goes wrong when a young child mind controlled sleeps with an adult person. And of course, it's an extortion called to assassin him and say it's sex work. If we don't address that in the occult, then we're basically paving the path to being burned on the stake. The women that said that the Me Too went too far buried loved ones a year, almost 10 years later. And because of the things that could happen when those women were discarded, silenced, assassinated, and then trafficked. It was to create these atrocities. Naturally, a person that didn't wake up from attempt to rape them doesn't broadcast about this topic at 5 a.m. Now, here is the thing. The people that say, oh, they are removing this to build something bigger, and they don't even see kind of like the weeds that they're. If they are abolishing rape in practice, in strategy, and building something that is indeed zero rape, okay, then shouldn't the people that are within those areas that are against rape be actually of assistance to the great thing that they're building? Not the slaves, because slavery is rape. To make somebody a slave, they rape a person to loss of sense of self and put them under mind control. That is slavery. Black men won't tell you that because it's not manly, because they were raping their women. That's why the release from slavery and the suffragism for black women was so delayed. And they blame it on the white women that needed a babysitter. The white women needed a babysitter because they were raped by the white man and the black man who thought he was liberating something. This is where, how should I say that? When I was in academia, one of the women that was um, a colleague, she was really, really pissed. And she was really, really pissed at women that climb up the ladder but don't contribute to promoting other women. Now, as I see that from the perspective of what was going on in academia, occultistic rape is inherently plagiarism. And the only way for women to climb up the ladder in basically an occultistic rape based patriarchy was to be a part of the offenders. This is the system that I had to physically be away from when I said no to that type of thing and made a thesis proposal that literally exposes that by chance. Exposes that by chance because I just looked at science, and whichever way and any angle we would look at science, we would uncover the projects that are classified because they target the people to be occultistically raped and enslaved. Now, is it the same in occultistic traditions? With Ghislaine Maxwell it was. Towards the 50s, Aries ingresses to Taurus. Ketu, 5 degrees Virgo, royal degree, slowly approaching Regulus, already in Magha Nakshatra. Reminding us of the little detail here. What Mercury 22, what is the one thing that, if not eliminated, could get in the way of sovereignty. And with Ketu Makra, anything Leo-like is always going to be Me Too related. Now, those that say, oh, the Me Too went too far, we should eliminate those witches, yeah, that's being burned at the stake as a woman. As a woman, because she's a woman. You know, there are Jews that blame the Holocaust on women not dressing modest. And some of these are women. And, you know, I remember I had a conversation with a woman. I don't remember what she was talking about, something about modest clothes or not. And I was turning to her and say, listen, at the gas chambers, everybody was naked. It happened no matter what people were wearing. If we are going to divide and disallow people to be themselves, then in the gas chamber we were all equal in the face of that God who let us all die. If it was because women were not modest, then why would my mother need to not keep me next to my grandfather so that he wouldn't touch the child, the child, the child when a lineage died in the concentration camp, 14 people except for my grandfather and his brother. Maybe it was not about women not dressing modest. Honoring the feminine, if we think about occultism, honoring the feminine, the occult, first of all, is associated with the feminine. Okay? It's the invisible. Honoring the feminine is a necessity when we want the occultistic practice to work. And just like, how should I say that? You know, if I do a Beta Per Se talisman, it means that I deeply meditate on what is the Beta Per Se story. What does it mean? Okay, to you know, to abolish rape, else the raped person that wasn't believed, um, basically their rage turns dead bodies upon dead bodies into stone. Okay, I mean, and if you walk and you see around the Great War, which is the masses of land with stone upon stone upon stone upon stone upon stone, and a lot of them are anonymous graves. That is Beta Per Se. That is Saturn, Mars, Uranus, Beta Per Se in between 1939 to 1941. You say, oh, that's the Great War. The Great War, yes. The Great War, we had Neptune there, if I'm not mistaken. Wait a second. We had Neptune there. Standard Oil was, I don't remember. Standard Oil was Pluto, Neptune. I don't remember where. I think we had Neptune Beta Persei, either during the Great War. I'm gonna have to check it again. Because then we'd have Uranus and they were not co-present. It makes sense that it was Neptune. Either Neptune or Pluto even. I checked that in another episode. I will need to... Wait, Pluto it wasn't because Hitler was born with Pluto in Gemini. No, so the Standard Oil was, I think, Neptune Beta Persei or Pluto Beta Persei. And the Great War, maybe Chiron, but I'm not sure about that. Wait, Chiron. We're gonna have Chiron 2026. We're gonna have Chiron in Taurus. 50 years back would be 2070s. 50 years back would be the Great War. The 2020s. And so towards basically, what would be the 2020s though? So that would be the in-between wars. So what was in the Great War? I need the Great War. I need a Great War placement. Anyway, the second World War story is kind of obvious. There were the suffragists, they were ritually and occultistically raped and sacrificed in the death camps, and then women got the right to vote. But to really tap into their rights, women had to basically raise awareness to abolishing occultistic rape and to argue with the scriptures. And but the Great War, I don't remember. Um, and yet the thing that I saw was of the Great War. So it was kind of like a timeline where there would be mass anonymous graves or mass graves of stones. We think about lines of stones, various lines of stones, orderly orchestrated to denote at people that died, but we don't even have their names. And this is what I saw around the Beta Persei transits. Um, and so we can't actually, do a Beta Persei talisman and target someone to be trafficked. Or do a Beta Persei talisman and not believe a person when they speak about them being targeted for trafficking. Or do a Beta Persei talisman and participate in trafficking rituals or ritual abuse without addressing that through Beta Persei or asking to correct that. If somebody, let's say, was raped and tortured, then the first thing that they would go to when they can actually, I don't know, do a ritual or a ceremonial magic again is to address that and correct the effects of that. Just like I couldn't do, let's say, sedna veneration without addressing the connection to Standard Oil and the connection to ritual abuse of infants and the agendas to basically de- defeminize the feminine. um, because it's all sedna and the connection to the minerals in our tea. Um, so in these weird timelines, when we want to address the esoteric that comes to femicide, basically, and perpetuate the dishonor, the humiliation of the feminine, um, the first and foremost thing is to address that in our occultistic practices and to sort the wheat from the chaff, whether it's regarding Genesis, whether it's regarding the Bible, whether it's regarding indigenous practices, whether it's regarding religion or the type of, or how do we do the ritual. Um, the inclusivity, for example, with beta persons, like, okay, abolish rape, what does it mean? The person that is tending to their inner child, they need housing, they need food, they need to connect with the land in a way that is sovereign. They might not be on the original land because they may have been trafficked or their lineage was trafficked. And they can't really go through, let's say, an expedition. And anything that builds on raping them basically dooms itself to be a perpetual war state. The meaning of perpetual war state is dishonoring the feminine. Allowing rape at war is dishonoring the feminine. Okay, so when I work with, let's say, a beta per se talisman, it has to include all of that. It doesn't remain on surface level. It also means that the type of psychiatry that tags the raped rather than the rapist is dishonoring the feminine. The person that comes to say, "Hey, I was raped," then upon their healing, we need to check if they were in physical rituals where they would have been perpetrator and were dissociated. But other than that, they have already come to stop the cycle of raping. The person who raped, they blame it. They try to bring the raped person to hospital, where they would be tagged as crazy if they talk about the rape. You can't consolidate with people that have, let's say, Taurus 8 house, that would be Libra ascendants. You can't consolidate wealth on, let's say, buying a hospital or donating to one without considering the beta per se story. Were there people raped in that hospital? Now we have to understand that the continuation of enabling rape is the witches burned on the stake. Being a part of the dead bodies upon dead bodies. Now, this is not a point of concern as it's much a point of awareness where people can simply correct what was up until now wrong. They can simply correct that, and this is where now it's kind of like I'm not. It's not a doom and gloom prophecy. It's kind of like, hey, there are many things we can do right now to correct that wrong. Anything. First of all, abort and abolish anything that is now being built that is based on raping in strategy or in goal. Secondly, correct the part like having the goal and the strategy with the rapey elements, the occultistic rape and the rape removed from the strategy and the goal. Now we have a refined creation. And rewrite the scriptures that are rapey. If we allude to Genesis, we allude to a creation story that was rape. Unless we stress something that is different and denounce the rape in Genesis. And any First Nation equivalent would need to do the same. If we reconnect with our culture as First Nations or whichever tribe by painting the symbols that would tell us that a girl is turned into a woman, we need to be a little bit more accurate about what is it, what does it mean to us, and what is it and what is it not. Because originally it was a legitimacy for the Puritans to rape girls that turned women at 12. Sedna's story, Sedna was an Inuit goddess. She's an Inuit goddess, okay? Now, of course, for a woman that is happily, orgasmically wedding her beloved and desired husband that desires her and have an orgasmic birthing baby, of course, to paint the symbols of her heritage of becoming a woman is a moving, deep, and profound, joyous experience. That's how we should be, but we should also defend that, staying in those margins and not leak into forced wedding at puberty. There are many ways in which that can be gone about, but that needs to be tended to, and that's the issue. On the level of scriptures, the massacre of the Huguenots, okay, they reformed the scripture, but they didn't reform the misogynistic whatnot around that. Women were living their life, and then boom, massacred so much for the Catholic people that it prompted Vogue. And Vogue was the Dutch colonialism, which inspired the entire American. Why the Huguenots did not argue with the script. They kept, with even the Reformed script, they did not denounce the misogynistic scripture, and they did not rewrite their scriptures to accommodate for the very practical life that women were already living. Just like feminism is not, how should I say, changing the laws is not suffice for feminism to be. That being said, having feminism with the laws being anti-feministic is also not suffice. There's a whole lot of sorting the wheat from the chaff when it comes to astrology and astrological magic in general. And I'm speaking as an astrologer that does talismans or talismanic art and runs into this issue as I read on What does, I don't know, Alcyone mean? What does better per se mean? And so on and so forth. Hey, that thing that I'm learning, that thing that I'm using practically in modern days for modern, in modern contexts and in modern settings and with the spirit of the time alignment, was used previously to ritually rape and torture children to give them some sort of an eternal life as a consciousness that goes through bodies. That's the I cannot argue about the fact that this is the origin of where astrology came from. I need to sort the wheat from the chaff as I come to do, I don't know, a Zeus talisman. I'm not giving astrological consultations one on one, but also when I'm looking at, let's say, the forecast. How much of what is predicting for Pluto and Aquarius would be completely different if not for occultistic rape? Aries is a megalithic example. In whether Copernicus or nearly everybody Aries was trying to tackle the issue of occultistic rape through the sciences or the social changes. And I can tell because it's kind of like a native knows a native. I look into Copernicus and I'm like, he knew. He knew. That's why he was insistent on the earth revolving around the sun. Now people say, oh, he was a clone, he was a... I know, but he tackles that in very recently, Richard Feynman talking about the atom as the attraction and repulsion. That if it comes too close, it repels. If it is just close enough, it magnets. Was Feynman not a part of the issue? What happened when his wife died? He was, to his defense, he was pretending to be a student. He wasn't trying to use power in the sense of authority, but he was definitely trying out occultistic methods that were basically to perpetuate trauma bond with women because he thought that that's what works. Now he would think that that was what works because if the women around him were ritually raped and tortured, probably also he, then that would be what would work, and that would be working on the basis of rape and assassination. And he also, in his book, he said he tried that once and then he decided not to do that because he couldn't have respect for the woman that he raped. But he didn't have the insight. He had the insight into quantum mechanics, not into um, and he was one of the greatest whistleblowers upon the entire pyramidal scheme or the pyramid being upside down. And this is um, very much to do. I haven't looked at Aries in Feynman's chart in particular, but it's very much to do with Aries in general. He would have Aries at the end of Pisces because Aries would ingress only in the 2020s, and he was born, I think, 1917 or 1911. So he would have Aries at around my ascendant. um, yeah, I never thought about this. um, this was the first chart that I did when I did Spirit of Matter. Um, so It would be a Jupiter ruled. I don't remember where was his Jupiter. Neptune he had in Leo in the 12th, Virgo ascendant. Yeah. Now, Soul hours, we're probably in Venus hour by now. Another thing that comes about with honoring the feminine is taking into account that a person is not a bot. What do I mean by that? Another form of discarding a person's voice and opinion is discarding that as a bot, or discarding that as something that may be um, inorganic, or it's kind of like, instead of saying that person is imagining, is saying that that person is imaginary. And this is another form of mistreating an individual that can come up at the discourse, particularly now when people genuinely and authentically wonder if they are arguing with a person or with a bot. But when we talk about the beta per se teams, then this type of kind of discarding or discounting can bring the dead bodies upon dead bodies. And this is the praxis of, and if in beta per se we talked about dead bodies upon dead bodies, now we're talking more about when everything is diverging away from the feminine. Uranus is in a yang sign, earth sign, Pluto in an earth sign, Neptune in Mars sign. We are no longer in Venus territory. Up until around the 50s, we won't have an outer planet. Well, not up until the 50s, because we're going to have Uranus, but it's not before really Aries is in Taurus that we're going to have Uranus, I think, in another Venus sign. We're going to have Uranus at the sign of the moon, and we're going to have Uranus at the sign of the sun, which would probably bring a Me Too like effect for 7 years. And I think Ketu Magha is now preparing us for Uranus in Leo. We're going to have Uranus in Gemini 2026 until around 2030, 2030 something. Then in the mid 2030s to, or beginning of the 2030s to the 2040s, when I have Uranus in Cancer, and then Uranus is ingressing into Leo, where it would be conjoining with the ingress of Aries in the 2050s. In the mid 2040s, with the delve of Aries into Taurus. So we're going to have Aries ingressing into a Venus sign, while Uranus doing its Uranus-y thing on Leo, which is 7 good years of Me Too. So Ketu Magha, for example, if I think about, well, how do I de-rape my food, meaning source my food from non-rapey places, or think about how I can abolish rape from more and more aspects of life, or textile, for example. Um, while not discounting needing to eat, for example, not ignoring or not gaslighting myself that I don't know, that I don't need fish if I do, and so on and so forth. Um, and holding the place that I really don't know what would be my nutrition if the world would be without rape. Like, I really don't know.